Hey y'all, Katie here with MOMnation, and welcome to another episode of Our Love Story. We know being in a relationship is hard, so Dyanna Eisel, certified couples counselor, and I talk through different tips and tricks to help you navigate your relationship and get through everyday life. While you're here on your favorite podcast platform, please subscribe to our channel. Or if you'd like to visit us on YouTube and watch the video, our handle is MOMnation USA. We hope you enjoy the show.
Maybe. Hey, what's up, Dyanna? And welcome, MOMnation. We are back with another episode. This is our monthly episode, guys, and I'm so excited. I think I say this every podcast episode, but I can't believe that we are coming up on 2 years. We have so much value, so much content, and so many great tips and tricks. So thank you so much, Dyanna, for being here with us every month, for spending your time with me, for spending your time with the audience, and for providing the value that you provide. It is just absolutely phenomenal. And I know it helps out a lot of mamas. So thank you.
Thank you. I love being here. This is so fun.
It is so fun. I agree. I look forward to it also. So let's dive right into the topic for today. And guys, I'm going to watch the comments. So if you have any comments or questions that you would like to ask, definitely ask away on the live here, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. But let's jump right into it, Dyanna. Before the show, we were talking about today's topic, and I love this because it kind of brings it to the basics. Like, why are you seeking out couples counseling? What is the reason? What do you typically see in your office? I think before on some previous episodes, we had mentioned it's typically a last-ditch effort. Is that the majority of time what you're seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if it's the majority of the time, but I do feel like a lot of people think about couples counseling as a last-ditch effort. Like, I feel like our issues have gone on for so long and I have so much resentment built up that I feel like this is like the only option. It's either stay or go, right? Like, this is do or die time sort of thing. And so there's inherent issues with that being the why, right? Because sometimes if there's just so much resentment, broken trust in between you guys, like, it makes it really hard to backpedal to go back and heal like all of those years of that happening. Whereas when you're being proactive and like maybe you've only experienced these things for a shorter period of time, it's easier, and I say that, loosely, easier to attack some of those topics without years and years of mounting resentment to try to dig into. Because sometimes I see, couples come in here where one or both of them are just nearly checked out, or they have so much anger and resentment that they don't necessarily see the changes that are happening because subconsciously they've already made up their mind that like, this person's not going to change. I haven't gotten what I needed this whole time. Why is it going to happen now? Oh, you're only making these changes because the couples counselor told you to do it. So when that's sort of the mindset, it's more difficult. And I will say that those feelings are valid. Having those years of resentment and broken trust, the way that you feel, is totally, totally valid. But then that brings us back full circle to like your why. Are you here to get the couples counselor to agree with you and tell you that your partner is wrong? Are you here because you are willing to dig real deep and see if there's a potentially new future for the two of you? Or is there like a third option? Is there like another option here? Is it just we need to co-parent effectively, peacefully for the kids or whatever? So like, that's why the knowing your why is so important, because if you are choosing to dig really deep, that is a hard process after a long period of time.
Yeah, I bet, because feelings are calcified, and honestly, like, the honeymoon is over.
Yeah, it's like long gone.
Yeah. So do you find it, I don't know if easier is the right word, but do you find it more effective when couples come to see you a little bit earlier in the game, when the honeymoon feelings are kind of still there?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Even when the honeymoon feelings are not there, there's still a strong level of like mutual respect in the relationship, and not as much like resentment that's built up. So you're definitely more open to not only want your partner to change certain things, but you're also more open to like, oh, okay, I can see how I'm contributing to this. I can see how, I'm accountable for my role in the relationship right now. It makes it easier and less there tends to be less defensiveness when it's earlier on, because it hasn't been, I've been hearing this for 10 years about how I don't do this, or I don't do that, or you need this, or you need that. And so it hasn't been like 10 years of that. Once you get to that point, it's almost like any sign of conflict or any indication that there's going to be conflict, it's like, nope, I'm out. Like I'm going to get totally defensive. I'm going to put my walls up, and I'm just not open to it anymore. So when you have a smaller time frame, there is less experience in the relationship and more openness to change to make a healthier future.
I totally agree with that. And I wonder if our audience members, our followers, really know what other times is appropriate to come in and see a couples counselor. And you, before the show, you had mentioned premarital, you had mentioned pre-baby. So let's talk a little bit about that and how that can be helpful to kind of get behind the problem, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So when you're doing, like, let's start with like premarital counseling, you are trying to identify, and I will say there's, like there's the religion aspect of it too, right? Where some people will go to their religious leader, pastors, whatever, to get premarital counseling. That's totally fine. I feel like that's a separate thing. You can still get that support from a faith perspective. What I'm speaking to is strictly from like a therapist / counselor with that particular education behind them. I'm speaking from that perspective. So I just want to put that out there. I feel like when people are very aware of their backgrounds, their history, the family that they came from, maybe some predetermined identified struggles, like I know I'm going to have a hard time with this. I know that communication is not my strong suit. I know that I've come from a relationship where there's trauma. When you've identified those things ahead of time, because you've done your own work, perhaps like an individual counseling, then you're just coming together and trying to determine like, where can we experience some speed bumps? Let's get ahead of it now and try to identify like our attachment styles. Like I said, our previous trauma experiences, what we've learned about ourselves, and then go over like your values and expectations for what you want your roles in the relationship to be, because there's so much conflict that comes out of that, out of expectations that are not expressed. And so the other person doesn't know, and both people now become set up for failure, and not overall, but it's going to cause a lot of conflict. Roles in the relationship, what is my role? What is your role? What does a provider mean in our relationship? Like if you have identified yourself as a provider, does that mean you're the financial provider? Does that mean you're the emotional provider? Like what does that mean exactly, as to what like our roles are? Like how are we going to complement each other and identify what our expectations and roles are in this relationship? So those things can be explored a little bit more, including values, right? Like do we want to raise our future children with any sort of religion? What are our parenting styles? What does discipline look like? What are our expectations for behavior? Sleep training. Oh my gosh. So many things that just smack you in the face when it's happening, and then it can cause a lot of conflict. So those are some really good topics and a really good reason to do premarital. It's not a negative thing at all that like, oh, you're assuming they're going to have problems already. No, we're just trying to make sure we're on the same page about a lot of things that most people do not talk about until it becomes a problem, right?
Yeah,
like
it's
don't
like
talk
insurance.
about those things. Yes, like you don't know until it happens.
It happens.
And you want to have that contingency plan in place, right? So when you do hit that stage of your relationship or your kids' lives or whatever, like, oh, we've already worked through this. We already talked about what our expectations are. Like, let's move forward with the plan that we'd already put in place, because I understand what that means to you and you understand what it means to me, right? Identifying sources of compromise. Like, what are some things that are unsolvable problems? Like every relationship has at least one unsolvable problem. What are ours? And what are some things that I'm willing to negotiate on or compromise in? And again, I've said this before, the sign of a truly good compromise is both people feel like they lost a little bit, right? It's not one person winning everything. It's not one person losing everything. It's both people lose a little bit. So like, what are some areas, or values that we can either compromise or negotiate on ahead of time, so that we don't have those conflicts when they do come up?
I love everything that you said. And the biggest thing that spoke to me was the expectations and roles. Because
Yes.
I feel like we grow up, we're taught certain things, we're raised in a certain way. Everybody else in the world is raised in a different way, could be similar, but it's definitely different. And so we develop these expectations of roles and of others, right, based on our experiences. And I've even done this a bunch in my own head. I'm thinking, oh, well, he should behave this way because this is how a husband behaves. This is what a dad does. And he's not on that same page, maybe didn't have that same upbringing or have that same experience. And so he's just doing him. And here I am stewing because he's not doing what I expect to see. Yet, if I haven't communicated that and we don't come to some sort of agreement with that, right? Because there can be expectations of one party where the other one's like, no, I don't agree to that. Like, that's not my thing. I'm not going to do that, right? But unless we have that conversation, how are we going to know? And so now we have two parties that are literally building resentment based off of nothing.
Based off of miscommunicated expectation. And a lot of times, I have to say, it comes down to just not knowing. We have an expectation of our partner to do a particular thing, and you say it to them in words like, this is what I need. But sometimes it gets lost. Like they don't understand what that means. And without any frame of reference, it's really hard to come up with that on your own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If your point of reference is a particular provider, let's just, pick on guys for a second. Traditionally, historically, the provider is the financial provider. He's the one that goes to work all day and he makes the money, and, mom would stay home and, take care of the kids and make meals and blah, blah, blah. We are getting better with that, but, traditionally, that's the way that it is. But if that's, your male partner's view of what a provider is, and you come in with like, I need you to be more, emotionally supportive. I need you to provide me with affirmation. I need you to recognize me and give me, different acts of love or whatever. And he's like, huh? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Right. And so it's basically just like, he's just like beating his head up against the wall and she's just like on fire because she's like, why don't you understand? I don't know how I can make this any clearer for you, what I need. And it's really comes down to like, he doesn't have any point of reference of what that's supposed to look like. So we're literally going to have to like draw it out for him of specific examples of what he can do. And sometimes there's pushback with that with like, well, then that's just like a checklist of me telling him what to do. In the beginning, kinda, if he doesn't have any point of reference for what you need, then he needs an outline. Like he needs some sort of framework of what to do. And in the beginning, it might feel like you're telling him how to do it, but then he's going to see like the reverb from that. He's going to get the feedback from that and see, oh, like, this is what she's talking about. Oh, I get it. Like, I get this is just what she needs. She needs, like physical touch, or she needs words of affirmation. I just need to make sure I'm more cognizant of telling her how much I appreciate when she cooks dinner or takes care of the kids, picks them up, whatever. You know what I mean? And so that point of reference is so important. And that question of like, what does a provider look like? And what are our roles in this relationship so that we have a clear idea of what our expectations are going in and we can calibrate it if necessary.
Yeah, I think I think that is so huge. And there's this old cliche like term or, that women maybe often use. I don't know. I haven't heard it in so long, but well, if he doesn't know, I'm not telling him. Mm-hmm. Right? Like he should already know. Mm-hmm. He should come to the table knowing this stuff. He knows me. If he doesn't do this, he doesn't know me. Mm-hmm. Give the guy a break. And I mean, and it's a two-way street too. Like, obviously we're just talking about, one side right now, but it's the other way around too. Like, I feel like, the spouse, whether it be a man or a woman or whatever, needs to come to the table and be clear and give that checklist. So maybe you're giving a checklist to him and he's giving a checklist back to you.
And would you know what that looks like if they fulfilled it? Like, have you gotten to a point where you're so angry and resentful? Would you even recognize their effort if they were doing things differently? Or would it just be a matter of like, well, you haven't been doing it all this time, or you're only doing it now because, you know, the couples counselor told you to do it. And there is a lot of pain in that. I see it, you know, in the partner who's been asking for these things for a very long time. And there's a lot of hurt. Like, why is it that when you say it, he commits to doing it, but when I've been asking for it for years, he doesn't do it? And it simply comes down to objectivity, right? Like, you know, and here, like, there's a safe space where I'm completely objective. I do not have the emotional investment that you do in the relationship. Right. So you can present yourself in any honest way, and you're not going to get any judgment or criticism from me or any emotional reaction from me. So sometimes it requires two things. One, like reflective listening, which we've talked about before. Like, let me tell you what I just heard, and you can tell me if I'm accurate, right? Like, 9 times out of 10, that's where communication errors come from, is someone says a thing and they hear the literal words come out of their mouth, but they attach a different meaning to it. So when we're, you know, all three of us are in the room and one partner says a thing and the other partner says, okay, so basically you're just saying X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, hold on, because I didn't hear that. So like it's interesting that you heard it that way because I heard it a different way. And now we're in this different space where you can hear things differently, you know? And then it's like, it's so crazy because like you can almost literally see the light bulbs go off sometimes because it's like, yes, that's exactly what I've been trying to say. You just said it differently. I get it. You know what I mean? And it's like, sometimes that's just what it takes, is that objectivity, that third party to just like untangle the miscommunications and really get to like, okay, so basically what I'm hearing him say is this. Is that accurate? Like, correct me if I'm wrong. And a lot of times, not every time, but most of the time, they're like, yeah, that's it. That's what I've been trying to say this whole time. You know what I mean? And then it just like clicks. It's like, oh, okay. Now I get what you're saying. You know what I mean? So like that reflective listening part is so important. And then the objectivity part. So when they say, why can't you do this when I ask, am I not worth it? Am I not worth the effort for you to change that particular thing after years of asking? But now you seem overly invested and committed to doing it now that we're in counseling. A part of that is the objectivity part. Like, there's a level of safety with being here that like I can say things knowing that we're sort of in this controlled environment, that things aren't going to just like pop off like they might at home. And we're going to be able to like slow it down and go through the entire conversation bit by bit, piece by piece, without the fear of it becoming reactive, because that's why a lot of people hold back, right? They don't say what they mean because they're like, well, this is going to cause a conflict. So I think it's just safer if I just zip it and not say anything. That's, you know, short-term gain, right? But long-term problem. So when you're in here, you have a little bit of that safety net to say it, you know, and that builds a lot of confidence and trust in the relationship to be able to hear it and be able to communicate without the unintended consequences of negative conflict.
Totally agree and love that. And, you know, I honestly have said it myself, and I question it now, and I question why I felt that way when you had said, you know, I've been telling you this for years. Why, when we come in here, are you just finally hearing it? I can understand why the spouse that has been telling for years feels a bit resentful for that, but isn't that why we are working on things anyway, is to learn and to grow? Like, you know, I'm not going to get upset with my 4th grader because he doesn't know calculus right now, because he needs to go through the basics and learn all the way up to getting to that point, right? So we're humans and we're constantly learning and growing. And I feel like we can maybe give a little bit more grace to the other party if they are putting the effort in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily mean that person is less genuine because they're doing it now, right? Because you're doing it in couples counseling. It doesn't mean that their intentions weren't good before, but sometimes it just hits different when you hear it from like an objective party, and you get it, you understand. And for someone who is conflict avoidant, for someone like that to feel seen by an objective party is so powerful. Like, I understand why you would want to avoid conflict. Like, I wouldn't want to either. If this is your definition of conflict, or this is what you've observed in your life, I wouldn't want to do that either. So it's easy to see why you've been avoiding conflict. And just being seen and being validated in that way is like, yes, I'm not trying to be an asshole. I just struggle to communicate how I feel and have conflict in a constructive, healthy way.
Right. No, I totally get that. So we have premarital, we have pre-conflict, and then we have, like you had mentioned, a high percentage of couples that come in once they're in high conflict. So during a session, do you get like a temperature gauge of how committed either party is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I scale what their commitment level is. I scale it from the beginning and then intermittently throughout treatment as we review their treatment plan and like check our progress and see how we're doing. Scaling is really cool because you literally put a number 1 to 10 to it. And then as you move forward, when you identify that number going up, it's like it creates lots of hope. It's like, oh, that's cool. I was at a 4, now I'm at a 7. Like, this is so cool. You know what I mean? It's like real, like, data, quote unquote, you know what I mean, of like seeing improvements in the relationship. So a part of scaling in the beginning, typically, I mean, you're going to see a lower number by at least one of the partners. And that can feel really discouraging by the other person. Like if one person says like, oh, I'm 100% all in, like I'm at a 10, like we're going to work this out, whatever. And the other person's like, you know what, like I'm at a 4, like I'm only like half in it. You know what I mean? And that can feel really discouraging, but it's honest. And I would rather the honesty to see exactly where you're at right now, so that we can gauge like the course of treatment going forward. What's tricky about the scaling part is that some people do feel like they have to give a certain number to not hurt their partner's feelings. So I really encourage you, like, just be honest. Like, that's what we're supposed to do here. And if there are things that you are keeping to yourself or keeping secret, that is literally the antithesis of what we're doing here. So like, I need you to be honest about where you're at, because if, 2 months from now or a few sessions in, you're like, you know what, I'm done. I'm not even going to do this anymore. And then I was like, wait, you said a 9 like a couple of weeks ago. Like, hang on a second. Your partner's going to feel totally blindsided and not know like what to think. And they're going to start having all of these thoughts about trust and honesty and, all of those things, looking back in hindsight, all of that stuff. So be honest during that, scaling commitment question, like in the very beginning. When you have 2 partners that are both like, I'm at like a 3 or a 4. Well, hey, this is one thing you guys have in common. It's a good place to start. You know what I mean? Like,
you agree on something,
right? You agree on something. You're both in the same place. So like, it's tough, but like, you guys are both in the same place. So you both deserve to be heard. Like let's get going. You know what I mean? And then generally, like I said, throughout treatment, we'll continue to scale and see that progress moving forward.
So what happens when you have a partner that is like at a 0?
Well, 0 is like, why are you even here then? And I want to find out why you are here. Like, are you here performatively because you feel like you have to? And why do you feel like you have to? Is there some sort of string attached here? Is there some abuse present here? That's something that we have to identify, because if that's a thing, that is, couples therapy is contraindicated for that rather. So we can't continue if that's the case. But if one person comes in with, I'm done, well, what do you want to get out of this then? Like, are you wanting to, co-parent effectively? Are you wanting to, have someone help guide you through the separation process? Is this going to turn into discernment counseling? And discernment counseling is exactly what it sounds like. Like, we are going to determine whether or not we should stay together. And we're just going to identify what our strengths are, what our opportunities are. Do we have enough gas in the tank to make this work? Or are we really just trying to decide if it's better if we go our separate ways? So that person at a 0, I'm really going to ask a lot of questions to, as to like why they're here and what they want to get out of this process.
And so discernment is not together. So like, what does that look like? Let's just say it moves to that route.
Yeah. So if in discernment counseling, they decide like we're going to, we're going to break up, we're going to separate, we're going to divorce, whatever, then basically we have like our termination session, and we kind of just go over, what they took away from the experience, what they learned from the experience. I'll definitely offer additional resources and help for whatever they might need in terms of like family counseling if they have kids and things like that. But then ultimately after that, we just discharge.
And do you usually ever keep on one of them, or like how does
Yeah,
it
that's a really good
typically in your
question.
experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say probably half the time, one member of the couple who doesn't already have their own individual counselor will say like, hey, can I stay on for individual counseling? Now that we're broken up, we're not doing couples counseling anymore. And the short answer is yes, if I have your ex-partner's consent. And that might sound like, why? We're not together anymore. Well, you guys were both my clients.
Right.
So if I proverbially turn my back on your partner and be like, okay, we're never going to see each other again, but I'm going to see your partner instead, that can feel a bit like a betrayal.
Yeah.
And that therapeutic relationship is so important. If that other partner comes back in 5 years in a new relationship and is like, I had a really great experience with you, that relationship didn't work out, but like, now I want to come to you and explore this relationship or whatever. Like, I always want to protect that relationship. And so that's really important to me. So I will get the consent from the other partner to pursue individual counseling with the other partner and make it very clear that couples counseling can never be resumed after this point. So if 3 months from now, you guys are like, oh, we decided to get back together. Okay, we're going to resume. Like, I'm going to refer you out to a different therapist, because now I've already established this individual relationship with one of the partners. And now there's this, it gets tricky with the relationships. Now I've spent more time with that partner than with this partner. And we've talked about that partner in individual counseling in some capacity.
Right.
So that can definitely be like a breach of trust as well. And that other partner that's coming back in probably won't trust me as much, knowing that I have more information about the other one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anything else that you would like to add?
I think the only thing I'd like to add is just when you're toying around with the idea of doing couples counseling, don't do it because there's this huge insurmountable problem in your relationship that just feels like you can't figure it out. Like, don't use it as a last ditch effort. Like, couples counseling can be a really positive experience and a way for you to grow together. Also learn about yourself in the relationship and what your role is and how you're accountable. Like, don't wait for it to be a last ditch effort, because I'm not going to say that it's just not going to happen and you're not going to turn it around. It's just going to be extra tough. And require you to dig real deep to get to a place where the relationship feels healthy again. So, don't be afraid, to bring it up to your partner. Don't be afraid to ask questions, even call, set up consultations with any couples counselor of your choice, pick their brains, find out what they think. You think this would be a good reason? You think this is a good time? And I personally, I'll be honest and be like, well, it sounds like, it's at least worth a conversation, and see what they say. But don't wait until it's like a do or die sort of situation, because I don't think you're going to get out of it what you want to.
Totally agree. Totally agree with that advice. Thank you, Dyanna. And where can our listeners and followers connect with you? Keeping in mind that you are licensed in Arizona, so any other state you can refer to, though, correct?
Yes. So I'm only licensed in Arizona, so I can only see people in person or telehealth in the state of Arizona and not outside the state. But people can find me on Facebook and Instagram, Dyanna Eisel Therapy, or you can also go to my website, which is DyannaEiselTherapy.com. In the upper right-hand corner, you can click on getting your free 15-minute consultation.
Beautiful. And I have your Facebook page linked here in the show notes. So that's a quick and easy click to get over to Dyanna to start the conversation. Thank you again so much. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise.
Oh, thanks. You're welcome. And if you guys want to check out any of our past episodes, head on over to our YouTube channel. It is at MOMnation USA. That is our handle. Scroll down just a little bit. You will see what we lovingly call OLS, our love story Q&A with a couples counselor. You will see that playlist and can look at all of the previous episodes there. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we've got a lot. So you can definitely jump down the Dyanna rabbit hole on on our YouTube channel. Or if you prefer the podcast version on any of your favorite podcast platforms, just do a quick search for MOMnation Talk Radio, and there you will find us. Thank you again, Dyanna.
Thank you.
Bye,
Happy
guys.
spooky season.
Yes.
Bye.
Happy Halloween.